Hey, Matt Allen here. What we're going to do tonight is continue this topic on night fishing. I want to jump into subsurface reaction baits. I'm going to keep this one pretty simple. Again, I'm going to go over my 5 favorite baits, but I want to keep this one pretty short, and the reason why is, with one exception, these aren't baits that I feel give you a great shot at giant fish, at least not on the West Coast. More Midwest, there's a lot bigger fish caught with subsurface reaction baits than there are out here. But for the most part, these aren't as high of odds of giant fish as some of the other options we're talking about in the other videos. But you can still catch a lot of 4, 5, 6, 7 pounders and the occasional giant. The one exception, and I'm going to start with it, is the ChatterBait. The ChatterBait, and I brought this one in on a rod, took the rod right out of the boat because it's one of my favorite night baits. When the ChatterBait hit the market, I didn't jump on it right away. Who did? They were like $50 a piece on eBay, right? It was crazy. But once they started being widely available, I started fishing them, and at first I wasn't all that impressed. They caught a lot of fish, but they didn't seem to get the quality that I was hoping they would until I started experimenting with different ways to retrieve them. And the same applies at night. If you start experimenting with your retrieve options, this bait can blow your mind. I've got fish well over 10 pounds. Largest one came in just shy of 12 on a ChatterBait. Same thing as the other baits. I keep my color patterns with my night baits very simple. White, chartreuse, and black. That's all that I use. I don't think color is a huge deal, so I keep it really, really simple. But there are a couple of retrieves that I use with these. One is just the chuck and wind, throw it out, reel it back, very simple. The other one is to rip it, similar to what you would do with a lipless bait. Throw it out, let it hit the bottom, and then just pop it. And you'll feel it vibrate up, and then settle back to the bottom. And you rip it again, it vibrates up, settles back to the bottom. That is so deadly on big fish, just deadly. You can also just barely crawl it, steady retrieve right on the bottom to where it's barely moving at all. That'll get them. But that ripping it technique, that's my favorite. That's how I personally have got my big fish on the ChatterBait. So top 5 baits at night, this is definitely number 1. Next, we'll jump over to the spinnerbait. Obviously, that's such a winner at night. Whether you're throwing a big Colorado or an Indiana, just something that moves water, state to state, lake to lake, they're deadly. Nobody's going to argue with that. And again, I should retract some of what I said there at the beginning. They do catch giant fish. But in lakes where the fish are specifically targeting bigger meals, it might be outdone by a swim bait or something like that. But they will catch giant bass. The next one is going to be the big crankbaits. Whether you want a deep diver or a shallow running bait, either way, big crankbaits are hard to beat. Personally, I do a lot of deep cranking at night. Again, colors are simple. You stick to whites, chartreuses, blacks. You can never go wrong. The 2 brands I use the Norman DD22 and the Lure Jensen Hot Lips, the big one, the 3/4 ounce. Those are my 2 go-tos, but just so much fun for catching fish at night, just grinding it through the bottom, digging. The next 2 are both lipless baits. These are going to round out my top 5 favorite baits. They're both Lucky Crafts. If you're not a Lucky Craft guy, find something else, but you want to fish a heavy bait. That's why I fish Lucky Craft, because they make their baits really heavy in the various sizes. So even though, like the LV 500, even though it's not that big of a bait, the LV weighs 3/4 of an ounce. That's a hefty bait. So same deal. I'm doing the same thing with this. This one, the LVR D15, it's the biggest one that Lucky Craft makes. These baits, again, you can throw them out, grind them back. You can throw them out, slow roll them on the bottom. But my favorite retrieve, again, is to hit the bottom and just rip them, reel down, rip them, the rip and rattle. Sig Taylor taught me that one, a good friend of mine from up on Clear Lake. And it is just so deadly for getting those better than average fish. Now, that's how I used to get them. Then I started throwing that ChatterBait again. Some nights, you cannot beat the lipless bait. I think it's got to do with the sound, right? It just makes them mad. The ChatterBait doesn't have that, but it's got the vibration. The reason why I put more of my time into the ChatterBait is that if I hook them on the LV, what do I get them on? Little tiny treble hooks. You hook big fish on small treble hooks, that is disaster waiting to happen. Sometimes you land them, sometimes you don't. But you hook a giant fish on a big jig hook on a ChatterBait, as long as you put the pressure on them, that fish is coming to the boat. Now I should add, I don't use ChatterBait brand ChatterBaits. I'm using the term ChatterBait as like a generic. Use whatever brand you want. This is called the Bobby D's. You can only get these locally out here on the West Coast. You can't get them online. You can't get them anywhere. But the reason why I use them is super strong hooks, steel blades, can't break the blades, strong components. So find something local. Find somebody who's making a really strong bait if you're fishing for giant fish so that you're not disappointed.